Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. I am super excited to see you. Welcome to part two in a 10-part series on the 8 mathematical practices. Today, we're going to jump into our very first practice. For those of you, just as a reminder, if you don't know me, my name is Sara, and I am the one and only academic standards specialist at the Minnesota Department of Education. And I am partnering, because I'm a one woman show at this point, with the Minnesota Council of Teachers of Mathematics. I just want to thank them for allowing us to use their platform to get you registered for these webinars. Also, they will host on their YouTube channel the recording of this video. I always want to center Minnesota students. So these are children of the people that wrote the next set of math standards in the state of Minnesota that are nearing the end of rulemaking. And these are the students that will most be directly impacted by the standards that we're going to share with you today. And so this webinar series is part of a series on the shifts that exist in preparing for those standards. I wanted to share with you a quote about those students because there's a lot of research and learning that goes into how students learn math. And the National Academy's publication, How People Learn, I don't think I've linked to it yet, but I will link to it. It's linked on the slide, and I'll get you a PDF of my slides so that you can take a look at this. Shows that student learning is more robust if students first have a chance to grapple with a problem before hearing explicit instruction on it. And so we are going to take a look today at a math practice that is connected to that quote. By the way, I really like the word grapple. You'll see me talk about that word at the end. I also like another word that just came out in a new publication on high school mathematics from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics last week, and I'll show you that as well. These 10-part series is the goal to improve conditions for learning for all K-12 Minnesota math students. As we move forward, the good news about these 8 mathematical practices is they are things that we can start working on with our current standards, and they will seamlessly go into the next set of standards because they're not content specific. They're the things that overlie all of the math content across the grade levels. So today is the second in the series, but really our first mathematical practice. And we use MP for short in our standards, and this is MP1, make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. If somebody at the end in the chat reminds me, I do have a document where I pulled out all of the 2022 benchmarks that have MP1 cited in them. I forgot to upload it, so somebody at the end just remind me to get that uploaded. So again, this is part two. I am doing these 7 a.m. Webinars every other Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. And then I am getting the recordings of them uploaded so that you can use them with people in your sphere of influence. So all of the things are linked in a link that's put in the chat. Could somebody put the link for this document, the main one, because that's where the Zoom link always is. That's where all of the things that I'm sharing with you. I love this one that's specific for today, but if you can't get, you can get to the one specific for today if you can get to this one. And in there is a session specific document, and that session specific document has 2 huge things that I wanted to point out. One is a professional learning protocol that you could use the video recording that's going to be uploaded probably by Friday with people in your sphere of influence. And if you scroll down on the specific one, there are links, and I'll probably add some more to that. You'll notice one of the links I highlighted in green. That link is a specific toolkit that I'm not going to go over today, but it is a toolkit that I'll make for each of the math practices of things that are for students, for teachers, for parents. What is the progression of this particular benchmark across the grade levels? And it has a lot of links specific to this. So I will be making a toolkit that looks very similar to this for each of the 8 math practices, where I am collecting things that people have put together and crafting them for our Minnesota audience. And so as you take a look at that, just know those are the things that are in there. So let's get into this. The 8 mathematical practices come from what preceded it, the mathematical habits of mind. These are the things that in order to learn math, you have to do math. And we are creating mathematicians for the future when they leave us after 12th grade. And so, what are the habits and what are the skills that math students have? What are the things that allow us to do mathematics? We should be doing mathematics every day in our classroom. So, how do we create the culture for that to happen? Our new set of standards that is in rulemaking is made those more explicit by including dimension one, which is the 8 math practices. And the math practices describe the varieties of expertise that us as math educators at all levels should seek to develop in our students. It's not something we're saying students you have to have. It's we are changing the culture of our classroom to create these 8 practices that will allow students to do mathematics and be mathematicians as they leave us. These are the 8 practices we're going to be going over over the course of this series. The one we're going to look at today is connected to learning, doing mathematics and creating the culture of doing mathematics. So the only way to learn math is to do math, and the 8 practices are the things that set that up. And today, math practice 1, make sense of problems and persevere in solving them, is going to be the goal of what we're going to do. So let's get started. In the math or in our standards, if you scroll way to the end of our standards, there's appendix where you can read a lot about this math practice. I put this paragraph on the toolkit for you so you could go back and read it later. But it really gives you more of a sense of what math practice 1 is. I'll read the first sentence. Mathematically proficient students, we're creating the culture so that mathematically proficient students start by explaining themselves the meaning of the problem and looking for an entry point to its solution. So as we think about Minnesota students and how we create the culture, our goal in this 10-part series is the adults in the system. How do we create those conditions so that students can grapple and tinker with mathematics, so that they can do mathematics, so that they can find entry points? What are the things that make us happen? Prior to coming to MDE, I used this GIF in a lot of presentations I did, because a lot of times in my personal classroom and when other teachers talk to me, they talk to me about, like, it feels like I'm dragging students to mathematics. And so before you watch the recording for this, I don't know if anybody engaged in the pre-work for this. I gave you 2 options for pre-work that you could engage on connected to this particular webinar. One of them is something that we had in a webinar we did over a year ago on Sensemaking, and it's something that we used from Robert Kaplinski, and it's a 5-minute video that's brilliant, where students are being asked this question. There's 125 sheep and 5 dogs in a flock. How old is the shepherd? And I asked you to consider how 8th graders might answer, and the video shows you how they do answer. I also asked you as an adult learner to set a timer for 10 minutes and to engage in doing math and uninterrupted work on this task. I don't know if anybody did that. You can throw in the chat if you did either option A or option B, but I would not have anybody watch the pre-recording without them first engaging in one or both of these. Like, we want people to go in and tinker with the mathematics. So when we say mathematics, what do we mean? Tracy Johnson Zager wrote a really great book, Becoming the Math Teacher You Wish You Had. In there, she talked about her mother. And when her mother was asked, what is math? Her mother said, math is when they hand you a sheet of paper and it has a word problem and you don't understand it. And it reminded me of what my students were doing. Like, when I'd ask them, what is math? These are the things my own students in my 11th grade Algebra 2 classroom said about math. And so a lot of our students struggle to have a good understanding of what math is. So if we're going to make sense makers of math, it has to start with us understanding, what are we creating? And so this is the definition of mathematics that many use. It's the one I personally use, that math is the study of patterns. And I ask myself, is my classroom a place where students can be sense makers and think about math as a study of patterns? Are my students every day engaging in studying patterns? And mathematicians need to do 3 things. So these are the 3 things our students as sense makers need to be doing every day. They need to be noticing things, they need to be describing them, and generalizing them. Not some of them, all of them. And as we talk about a lot, this is not, we're trying to deconstruct this idea of classrooms where students are mimickers of the teachers and passive in the experience. We're trying to create students who do the math, because the way you learn math is to do math. And so it's engaging in that productive struggle and grappling with the math. The good news is it's a natural thing from when you are young. This is something that I shared in my last webinar of a 4-year-old who was playing with some cute, little rods that his father had, and really made some sense out of it. And there's some cool questions we could ask. And the student said, "Hey, these are the same," and asking students what they are. Even MDE's early childhood department, that's separate from mine, they talk about mathematics from age 0 all the way through 2nd grade. They've put out a bunch of play documents. I linked to one called Playing in Kindergarten, where they talk about the way that you learn is through play, and they talk about different types of play. They have 3 types. I'll show you 2 of them. There's child-directed play, where students are making meaning of the word around them. They're having a chance to grapple with it. They're having a chance to do the math. There's what they call guided play. By the way, this graphic has a math error on it. I didn't make it, but I like to tease my peers in that department that that is true. We even have evidence of play being important in the learning of math in our state. At our state fair, we have a whole event where we get hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people every year who are engaging in play, and they are all ages at Math on a Stick and playing. I was so inspired 10 years ago, the first year of Math on a Stick, that in my own classroom, I put a play table, and this is what it looked like between every single class. After school, before school, students were engaged in making meaning of their world. It's a natural skill that we have within us. And there are habits of productive mathematical thinkers. One of them is to make sense and persevere in solving them. And by the way, this just came out last week in a new book on high school, reimagined, revitalized, and relevant. But they added to this math habit a second way of thinking about it, and they called it tinkering productively. If you think about play, play is really tinkering productively with math and statistical ideas and problems as being really, really important in the future of mathematical classrooms moving forward. There is a lot of stuff out there. I put a lot of these things in the toolkit that I provided you on defining what Math Practice 1 is. What does it mean to make sense of problems? What are students doing? They're making sense. They're using a process for solving problems. They apply strategies. They adjust their strategies. They think about their solutions. Are they reasonable? What are teachers doing? They're posing problems every single day. They're providing, they're discussing student strategies. They're emphasizing the process rather than the solution and the answer. And so if you're like, what does this even look like? There's a lot of tools out there that can help us think about what that would look like. Mike Flynn has written a book on the 8 mathematical practices. It's going to be a book club that you'll hear more about in the next month from the Minnesota Council of Teachers of Mathematics, Minnesota Math Leaders Committee. In that book, he says we need to shift away as teachers from being the givers of knowledge to being the facilitators of knowledge development. And that is what the 8 practices that we're trying to develop in our students are trying to do. Like I said, in Robert Kaplinski's video, students were asked this problem about how a certain number of sheep and dogs, and then asked how old the shepherd was. And if you think about how students might answer it, I asked a whole bunch of adults how they might answer it. And this is what the adults said. What's a shepherd? 25, 130. I don't know. There's not enough information. And so on. And here's the response from the video, if you didn't watch it. Of the 32 students interviewed, and they show you all 32 of them, 75% of the students gave a numerical answer. One of the things that we want to think about in our classrooms, if we're going to build a sense of sense making in our classroom, is we need to deconstruct the current pervasive culture of answer getting, that students think math is, to be good at math is to be the fastest one to get at the answer. And so normally because they think that that's what math is and it's testing. A lot of our students are constantly just like taking numbers in a problem and just like applying some type of arithmetic to them, and they're just guessing. And they're not really stepping back and engaging in sense making. And so if you think about how you can redefine that, there are a lot of tools to help you do that. And in the last 13 minutes, I'm going to share with you just a few tools and a few ideas, but I hope that you will go to the links that I provided, the toolkit, and do a deep dive to think about this more. Phil Darrow, who is one of the authors of Common Core, said, redefine math practice one. And he said it this way: math practice one, the sense making practice, really should be called learning to solve problems that you haven't been taught how to solve. And so engaging in, because one of the things that we know in our classrooms is students really feel like math is, you show me how to do it and then I'll replicate it. And when that's true, they're not engaging in sense making. So if every day our students had a chance to grapple with something in some kind of structured inquiry, math would go up. I would argue that I think it starts with us as adult learners. I think we need to every week spend 10 minutes grappling with a math problem. So I included just one problem for you to start with. And then watch yourself. How does it feel when you can't figure out the answer right away? I don't know if anybody did this problem. I played around with it, and it took me a while to get a solution, like a long while, and I had to step away from it and I had to come back to it. But like if we aren't willing to grapple with it, by the way, don't contact me and say, what's the answer? That's you and your addiction to answers. Like we want to live in this idea of, can I grapple with things and can I work to figure them out? We know that's what the research says about mathematics, is that students need to have a chance to have an experience, to grapple, to tinker with the mathematics. And then our job as teachers is to formalize that experience for students into the learning. We don't want to leave them hanging, and we don't want them grappling to a point where they just don't even try. We want to give them things that are in, as Vygotsky said, in the zone of their proximal development. So as we think about sense making, the only way to learn math is to do math. I want to give you some questions you can ask yourself about math practice one. Do my students engage in problems every day, especially novel problems, things that they haven't grappled with yet? I'm going to give you an example of some safe things that I give students, especially in the first half of the school year, that anyone can grapple with. Safe because you can't really get them wrong, and allows them to grapple with something and think about it and make sense of it, because we're building this skill, we're creating this skill in students. I'm not going to start with the world's hardest problem yet. I'm going to build up to that over the course of the year. Do my students have lots of different strategies for solving problems? If they don't, then they're most likely just mimicking what I, the teacher, like they're like, just show me how to do it, and like I will do it your way. That is what my watch and Siri can do with math. That's not the mathematicians of the future that we are creating. And am I centering reasoning versus an answer getting culture in my classroom? So I think there's about 10 or 15 really great free resources, math routines that you could be using on a regular basis. A lot of these are built into a lot of the great math curricula resources that you can purchase. One of them, I like to talk about this one because this one was made popular by Christopher Danielson in Minnesota, is Which One Doesn't Belong? The reason I call this safe is you cannot get this wrong. You can ask students to grapple with which one doesn't belong, describe it. In their descriptions, a lot of their ideas about fractions, equivalent fractions, not equivalent fraction, parts and wholes, will come out in a natural way rather than saying, hey, what is the fraction represented by each circle? That's a very unsafe question for people who don't feel good. That's Tracy Zager Johnson's mom. Like, I was given problems and I didn't know what to do, and so I just like sat there. If you read the whole story, instead asking which one doesn't belong. And the cool thing is, in all of the which one doesn't belong graphics, they all don't belong, but for different reasons. Another favorite one that I use all the time, and there's like hundreds and hundreds of these at her website, and I'll link to both of these sites. Fawn wins visual patterns, asking students to think about what comes next and why and how they describe that. And there's so many different ways they can do that. I'll also go find a video of Fawn describing this particular practice. And if we're going to center reasoning, I wanted to support you with one of the most important questions you can ask. All of these questions are essentially the same question. My favorite one is the last one. I'm curious why you said blank. One of the things I had to train myself as a teacher, if I was going to center reasoning and deconstruct answer getting in my classroom, was not to celebrate correct answers, because then it was just like them trying to get the like endorphin buzz from me when I said, yeah, that's great. And if you couldn't get that, it really contributed negatively to your mathematical identity. And so instead, all students, whether the answer is correct or not correct, I ask one of these questions. I'm curious why you said. So I'm going to give you a quick example. Oh, and by the way, this comes from a 5-minute video that I'll also link from Max Ray, where he talks about, am I listening for answers or to the students' reasoning? And so these questions come from this idea of listening to students rather than for answers. So this one comes from my friend Berkeley Everett. And a student one day in a teacher's classroom had this written on their paper. And it's really tempting as a teacher to want to be like, the student doesn't get it. They don't know what they're doing, and to come and like go and like re-show them how to do this problem. And when you think about this problem, if you want to create a sense-making culture in your classroom, what would you want to do to address the student? As you think about that, one of the things that I think about are the questions that were on this little thing. The thing that I would want to do is ask the student, yeah, I'm curious why you said how you got 75 as your student. And this comes from a tweet where Berkeley Everett shared the student work. It was a second grade student where the teacher helped realize the importance of presuming competence in students. That students have a lot of really important mathematical ideas in them, and supporting them in becoming even more precise. And so as we look at this problem, when the teacher asked, I'm curious about the 75, the student says, if you take 5 dimes and add 1/4, you get 75 cents. And so what the teacher did is worked with the students to put in context into their student work so that this 5 + 1 = 75 made sense as a mathematical equation that would be true as they were working. And so as I think about creating sense-making cultures in our classroom, one of the things that we need to do is train ourselves as adults to not celebrate the answers and presume competence in our students, find assets. And some of that, a lot of it, comes from how we question students. So one way to create an answer or a sense-making culture is to think about the questions that we ask in our classroom. Grace is the author of Routines for Reasoning, and she has a lot of routines that allow students to engage in sense making. And if you ever get a chance to hear her or her co-author Amy talk, one of the things she said about Math Practice 1 is it's not a problem to solve without MP1. It's just a problem that you're going to solve, not let me start this over. Without MP1, it's not a problem to solve, but an exercise to be done. When students don't have sense making, they're just doing an exercise to get it done, as opposed to trying to engage in sense making. A little over a year ago, I did a webinar with 3 of my math colleagues from Assessment and Compass here at MDE on sense making. This was the second in the series where we shared this definition of sense making. It's the process of understanding ideas and concepts in order to correctly identify, describe, explain, and apply them. Genuine sense making makes mathematical ideas feel clear, logical, valid, and obvious. The moment of sense making is often signaled by students saying, I get it, and I see. In that webinar, which I've already linked to on today's set of links. We talked about what were some of the ways that you could create a culture of sense making. And this is only a half-hour webinar, so if you want three more ideas, and we've gotten received a lot of positive feedback on these routines. These were ones specific preparing students for assessment. Check out that problem. I want to encourage you as we finish up, as I've said earlier in this, to yourself. If you want to create this culture for your students, it starts with us. We want to be tinkering and grappling with problems on a regular basis. Ideally, doing it with colleagues would be great. And it also is going to take us reading vignettes of what this looks like in our classroom. And so be looking for the book study on Mike Flynn's book coming out from MCTM. And I will add more to this as we're going along. But I have a ton more links linked inside of the Google Doc that is in the chat. I am going to put in the chat, I think I still have it highlighted one more time, the link to the sense-making toolkit. That's that thing that's highlighted in green on the tools for today. I would love for you to join me in 2 weeks for our next part of the webinar, which will be Math Practice 2, Reason Abstractly. I'm going to keep plugging along at these and finding tools for you to do this. I'm going to stop the recording in a moment, but I really appreciate you coming out. I'll stick around for about 15 minutes if anybody has any questions. We really appreciate at MDE that you engage in the work of the academic standards, and for me specifically in the math standards. So thanks for being leaders in your area. And I'm going to find my stop recording button.